I had a strange thought. If you could pay $10,000 a year in premiums to get gas anywhere you wanted, anytime you wanted, would you use more gas? I bet you would.
Betcha.
Anyway, we want to talk about the legislative scorecard Americans for Prosperity recently issued. Is this online on the website too? It is on. Oh, sorry. There you go.
Okay, well that's much better. AFPNewHampshire.com, and you can check out the legislative scorecard for 2016. It's just a case where we look at the most important issues over the course of a legislative session. We try to target about a dozen. We don't want to be one of those organizations that scores every single issue because not every issue is as important. So we
try to. It's not your focus to cover every issue.
Right. We don't. For example, we don't cover issues like social issues. We don't cover criminal justice issues, things like that. But on economic issues, we look at the top 12 or 13 issues. In this case, with 13 in the House and 12 in the Senate, that we feel best represent economic freedom here in New Hampshire. And so we had we pushed this out last month. And a number of legislators got A pluses. We're thrilled with the 29 members of the House who got an A plus from us, and the 2 members of the New Hampshire State Senate. That's Senator Gary Daniels and Senator John Reagan got A pluses. And now, to be fair, there are 47 other members of the House who got 100%, but missed at least one vote. To get an A plus, you have to vote in every single vote.
Hey, JR.
Good morning.
Hi.
And it's one of our A-rated members, not A+, but
A-rated members. You got an A.
Members.
Yep, you got an A. I see that right here. So welcome A member-rated AFP. So this is awesome. You guys, you check this out. And there's
every just a little jab.
Every website. There's a lot of groups that do scorecards that give out grades, and some are very specific. Obviously, some are very focused on guns, like you guys over there at New Hampshire Firearms Coalition. And, we talk about it every now and then at Granite Rock, and I'm like, we don't have that kind of time. There's just no, but there's like 60,000 groups in the state. No. Everybody's got a scorecard.
Well, it's a lot of work to put together a scorecard.
It's huge work.
First, you have to figure out what votes. Like the House Republican Alliance does 120 votes or something that are part of a scorecard. The NHLA does something similar.
It's a lot of work, but they're out there, and you got to take them with a grain of salt. Surveys, we talked about surveys at the summit. If you get surveys as a new legislator, obviously there's some you don't want to bother with. We had a great post a couple of years ago about a survey from the American Federation of Teachers that they were sending out to all their legislators. It was 20 questions. Not a single one of them was about education. Not a one.
Wasn't that the questionnaire that also had whether you were a member of the Free State Project?
It is, exactly, yes. You can find it at grantrock.com and a few other places. They actually wanted to know, is this the AFT survey, legislative survey?
Or do you know anyone?
Are you know anyone? Have you ever attended? Do you have a Gadsden flag? It's just, it's so ideological. It's disgusting.
Well, and on the side of the unions, right, we have Scott McGilvery running for Senate NEA president. Right, union president running for Senate District 16. We have
Joe Casey in District 6.
Is she a union?
Joe Casey. Yeah, he was very active. He was the Building Trades Council.
Okay. There's the SEIU, one of those running. The former American Federation for Teachers, Diana Lacey is running. There's 4 union president or equivalent running for office this time.
Boo. One more reason. That's a nice segue into the fact that next week is National Employee Freedom Week. one more reminder.
Time to pass right to work.
So and as I said, AFP will be putting out a white paper on the beneficial impacts of right to work in New Hampshire next week for Employer Freedom Week. Obviously, we hope that starts the conversation.
It's been a recurring subject all show long. Right to work.
Absolutely.
And we're in the former Right to Work New Hampshire office, so it's a good place for it. And it definitely. Go ahead. Sorry.
We talk about it for those who are not members of unions, and I agree that it makes perfect sense. But I can make a principled argument why even members of unions should support right to work, and it comes down that their membership and in particular their leadership is no longer accountable to them. Right? Once they're in place, they can do whatever they want. The moment right to work passes, their quality of what they do for their employees is judged by the right, by how many people choose to be part of the union. And if they're doing a good job, they'll have more. And if they're not doing a good job, they'll have less. And that accountability is a good thing. So for the union side,
Wisconsin, QED.
It's true, and it is true.
Yeah,
and
in other words,
I know
they took away mandatory union dues, and lots of otherwise government union
the state
employees
stopped taking the money out for them.
stopped paying the union.
Right.
The union lost 2/3 of its members.
Right.
And that's it. In private union, I was in a private union. I was a Teamster with UPS. Still am. I have a pension with UPS. Not very big, but I worked there long enough to get one when I turned 65. And I understand why there's a union at UPS, okay? Because I was eventually ended up having to do some management stuff near the end of my career with them, and I get that that constant beating that they're giving each other, and it costs that company a lot of money to have a union. But I get why they have them because of the nature of the work. It's a private union, but those private union members are paying an exorbitant amount of money for public unions, and I have a huge problem with public unions.
Right.
And I think it's important to point out that the only states where union membership is growing are in right-to-work states. Right-to-work states numbers aren't moving in non-right-to-work. Union membership is not moving in non-right-to-work states. And I think that to JR's point, when unions actually have to show a value that they're offering for the amount that they want to take from you, so you can actually see the value that's created, and they have to consistently show it to you and consistently continue to re-up your membership. It makes them highly accountable and means that they're working consistently on behalf of their employees, and that's not necessarily the case right now based on some of the surveys you see.
Yeah, and you look at, like, what was it, 2012, I think somebody released data that showed unions since 2006 had spent $4 trillion or some god-awfully huge number. $4 billion on political activity, and 96% of it was for Democrats. 96% of union employees are not Democrats.
So, like New Hampshire, I don't know if I have the data, but if let's say take for the assumption we're staying relatively flat in union membership, private union membership is actually dropping, and public union membership is going up. And that was actually one of the arguments that I had with a Senate candidate that helped convince them that right to work was a good idea, that they're seeing a drop because of the lack of accountability on the private sector.
Yeah, it's just.
And he was a union member, right?
So how do you guys go out and you talk to people, door to door? We talked about it in the first segment. At the summit, you talked about the personalization, making people understand how it really affects them. How do you guys talk to people about right to work?
Well, first and foremost, basically there are a number of reasons why right to work is beneficial. Number one is the economic growth component. There's a considerable amount of data. Wages are growing, and this was from a study done by the Congressional Budget Office, showed that between 2002 and 2013, wage growth in right-to-work states was 15.1%. Wage growth in non-right-to-work states was 8.2%. So the wages are going up faster. Job creation is double that in right-to-work states versus non. So some people just want to hear those basic economic facts. But at the end of the day, what often resonates individually with a lot of people is the fact that the notion that people could be forced to pay into an organization that they may or may not support without a choice on their part. And in New Hampshire, that's often, for example, in state government, is what's known as an agency shop, meaning that if you work for state government, you can be a member and pay the union for being a member, or you can not be a member and pay the union for not being a member. So that's a fundamental problem, and I think that people, some people are attracted to the economics of the issue, but a lot of people are attracted, bottom line, to the fact that there's a fundamental unfairness to forcing people to pay into an organization that oftentimes has a political direction that's very different from them, oftentimes has decisions about what happens in the workplace that they may not agree with. And continuing to force people to pay into those fundamentally seems wrong to a lot of people, and that's why, based on survey after survey, over 70% of New Hampshire residents have consistently said they support right to work.
It baffles me that nobody sees that, you have to pay for the privilege to have a job. What if you went to work for, like, say, my company? What if I had to pay every month for the privilege of working there? Nobody else does that. I mean, it's only unions.
Well, and I think, as I went back to, for those members, traditionally, union members have been told this is a really bad idea. It's not a really bad idea. what you're being told by a union leadership is this is a really bad idea because they don't want that accountability.
They don't want to lose the money either.
The moment that accountability is in place, they're accountable back to you guys as members.
Yeah, what if you choose not to pay dues? They lose money.
They do lose money, but they would only lose money if they're doing a poor job.
Correct.
Which is the accountability. I mean, we want accountability and transparency in government. Why can't we have that in union membership as well? So, anyway, there's a real value to this. As Greg pointed out, economically, it's the states that have passed this legislation are growing. We're at a standstill. New Hampshire's at a stagnation. In fact, I don't even know that we're making any real progress. We did start for the first time in over 20 years to pass some tax reform to bring businesses back. But as Greg and I have talked about before, the business tax structure here is worse than our neighbor to the south.
Well, it is, and of course we had Charlie there, and he only had 15 minutes to try to explain how the budget works, and I think he did a pretty fair job considering the task he was handed.
Right.
That's like taking a sip of water out of a fire hose. But I think that
Charlie can't do short very well. He's got so much data.
Yeah, and I think that getting back to the crux of this is you need to give the state advantages. We need to continue to find ways to give the state advantage. New Hampshire has a tremendous advantage as far as quality of life and people wanting to live here.
Definitely.
People want to live in New Hampshire. Businesses just don't want to start or bring their work here because fundamentally we have created a uncompetitive environment. So we need to focus on making that environment more competitive. And that's not just right to work. Right to work is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle that needs to be resolved.
Absolutely.
To flip the script and make New Hampshire the state of choice for employers.
Well, I mean, just look at the Northeast in general. Why is it that even Massachusetts and Rhode Island, which are not exactly low-tax environments, are doing better for job creation than we are?
Because their taxes are actually lower for the business. I mean, I was talking to an employer company of 10 people, maybe 15, right on the Nashua border. And we were having the conversation. I said, if you relocated your offices a half a mile south, you would financially be better off. And he's like, I never thought about it. I said, I don't want you to do that.
Way to drive businesses out of the state they are.
Is to fix New Hampshire and is to make us competitive because there's going to be people in Chelmsford, right? And Bill Ricca, who at some point will go, oh, if I moved a half a mile north, right, or a couple miles north, it would be better. Instead of seeing, as you said, 93 packed going south in the morning, for the first time we'd see more balanced traffic flow because people can, oh, great, there's an office park in Nashua. I'm just going to put my office there. It's not hard.
Because if costs were neutral, the traffic would be even in both directions as people just naturally distributed to where their skills were in most demand.
There are, as Greg said, there are other factors about the Beltway with the 495 Beltway in terms of academics and other things that are actually driving some of the jobs down there. Right? There's a whole bunch of research going on, and this is true in Research Park and Triangle, or Research Triangle in North Carolina and other places where there's development and incubators. But beyond that, once a business hits a certain level, it's got to choose a real home. It started it. Why not make New Hampshire the place of choice?
I think small business owners, they could be like, big city preachers. They got a lot of pull. They got a lot of weight. They can move votes. They can move minds. They can make emotional pleas. And you've got these people, and this ties back to a conversation we had earlier about how I have friends who are really, really frustrated about the presidential choices. But, they're looking at the macrocosm of politics when the real problem is the microcosm of state politics and local politics. You have this problem because you gave away your sovereignty. Right. You voted away your personal and individual rights, your state rights. Your state constitution means something. The federal constitution means something, but you let central planners deny you that power, and now you're pissed off and you don't know what to do. What you need to do is you need to take the Screw DC, Save New Hampshire pledge. You need to work as hard as you can to fix your state. Because if you have a governor and an AG and some state sheriffs and a couple other folks who understand what a constitution is, they can tell the federal government to go screw and begin to come up with solutions in these incubators that begin to untie all the strings to the federal money. Because states, even with the federal government sucking all these taxes up, can still create economic opportunity that will allow them to do what they want despite losing federal money.
You can state officials, state legislators, governors have a much greater impact on the lives of the average person than whoever's in Washington.
here are real numbers, right? By one vote, 182, 181, right? A clause was added into expanded Medicaid that allowed it to proceed. Had that clause not been added in, okay, the bill may have died. It's $1 billion spending on one vote on one person, right? By 4 votes, the Speaker of the House was chosen, okay? Had those 4 votes been different, we would have had an entirely 2 different years.
Very different.
So your votes about your state reps matter, and it comes down that a lot of people are saying, well, these moderates are okay. I'm not sure that some of these moderates who are willing to go along with the hardcore Democrats and the progressives are going to help New Hampshire long term.
Well, in fact, we'll have that very argument next week because Jack Flanagan is one of our interview subjects. And, of course, he helped to bring you the Jaspercrat as the speaker. And, he says he has his principled reasons why he wouldn't support Bill O'Brien in the crunch. And, we'll entertain those reasons. But the point is that, as you said, a handful of votes brought us effectively a Democrat-aligned House, even if it has a Republican majority.
Right. And I learned the value of votes. I was in Hoboken. It was a town of 35,000 people in the early 90s.
You're a hobo from Hoboken?
I'm a hobo from Hoboken. I'm a refugee from New Jersey, actually. Anyway,
anybody would want to.
It was New Jersey. I have a friend of mine who lives there who said, New Jersey, we're the strong survive and the smart lead.
Yeah. Or put another way, a nice place to be from.
A nice place to be from. There was a vote about developing the waterfront, which is an enormous crony capitalism, government funding, right? It came down out of 4,000 votes to 6 votes. Recount, when all said and done, it was 6 votes that decided the decision. And it was, don't go do this. This is a bad idea to pour a lot of government money into this. Let the private industries do it along at their own leisure. I learned the value of every vote matters in every election, in that election, right? Because 6 votes is not much. Crony capitalism casinos, right, died in the New Hampshire House in 2014 by 1 vote. I remember the paper saying beforehand, these 6 votes, these people right here are going to decide it. These libertarian-leaning Republicans, okay, who agree that being able to play a game of cards is acceptable, but who don't believe that the government should create the monopoly to allow that to happen out of the current statute that says thou shalt not gamble. And I was one of those 6 that was in the paper, and any one of those could have flipped it, and that bill died by 1 vote.
Mm-hmm. And congratulations.
Yes, one of the better things that, right, I attribute my vote to being the one that stopped, right, a statewide monopoly zone for Casino Company A.
Correct, and it's the same company.
Only hospitals get monopoly zones.
Only hospitals get monopolies in New Hampshire.
We tried. We get rid of Con, and then someone brings back the son of it, and it's
son of Con. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think
Wrath of Con.
that the ability to really impact people's lives is substantial at the state level, and so that's one of the reasons why at AFP we've really put a lot more focus on these state issues because. We need to be having a dialogue about these issues. It's important for people to understand that they need to be brought to the forefront.
We're going to take a break, and we can come back and address your point. So everybody hang in there. About 60 seconds. We'll be with you in a minute.
Excellent.